coming from a Tanakh Old Testament perspective, when I read the Tanakh, we also have what are called textual variants. So what do you mean? What do we mean by that? So we do not have the original copy of the Torah that Joshua wrote on the tablets of stone that were covered with plaster. It's described in the book of Joshua. We don't have the original Torah that Moses completed that he wrote. We have copies of copies of copies of copies. And what we do is we look at different manuscripts and we compare them and we try to find out what did the original say. Now, sometimes the differences are very minor. For example, in Exodus 15, there's a famous example where it says, Mikdash Adonai konanu yadecha, the sanctuary of the Lord your hands have established. And in some manuscripts, instead of Lord, it says Yehovah. Well, that's kind of important. However, let's be honest, Adonai and Yehovah is the same deity, is the same God, doesn't really change the message. What we have here between the King James Version and other translations is something that fundamentally changes the message. Do no such thing is a very significant difference. And what I love about this example is nobody, other than the King James only people, nobody disputes that these 6 words in Greek, 8 words in English were added. However, what's interesting is they were added in a relatively early period. You can see here we have a codex, a famous, important document, Codex Bezae. It dates to the 5th century AD, and it has those 6 words. And I love what John did here. He went through numerous manuscripts looking, are they in there? Are they not in there? Are they in there? Are they not in there? He basically taught himself Greek so he could read and identify these words in the manuscript. Codex Bezae, the 6 words are included. It says do no such thing in the 5th century. That's very early. Ephraemi Rescriptus is a really interesting codex. It's what's called a palimpsest. A palimpsest means it was recycled. They took the original gospel, they washed off the words, and they wrote a different text on top of it. What scholars in the 19th century did is they went through this thing with a microscope and took special types of photographs, and they were able to read the erased words. And what we have marked here in this 5th century, the original text of the palimpsest, it has the 6 words in Greek, do no such thing. So 2 witnesses, and we can say, hey, everything is established by 2 or 3 witnesses. But what do you do when you have 2 witnesses that say the other way around? Here's Codex Sinaiticus from the 4th century. And when we've marked there in red, that's where the words do not appear. If the words were in the text, this is where they would be, and they're not in the 4th century Codex Sinaiticus. Codex Vaticanus, 4th century, the words are omitted. Where we put in red here is where those words would appear. So we have 2 different versions. And John, what I love about the story you told is at the end, the way you described it to me, is we had 2, you and your friend were on the phone, and you said, you have your Bible and I have my Bible, and they're not the same. In one they appear, in the other they don't. Here's Codex Alexandrinus from the 5th century. The words are omitted. P74 is a papyrus, and you think a papyrus must be early. Not necessarily. This one's later than the codexes. It's from the 7th century. The words are omitted. So here's a quote from 2 of the greatest New Testament scholars who wrote a book called The Textual Guide to the Greek New Testament, Omanson and Metzger. Bruce Metzger is a legend in New Testament textual studies. They write, the reading, meaning those 6 words, 8 words in the English, do no such thing, is a Western paraphrase of the intent of the decree of James. And this is really interesting. These guys know that you're not supposed to keep the Torah. That's their starting assumption. And if those 6 words were inserted into the text, which they agree, those words were added, that they're paraphrasing what James's original intent. Here's what James meant to say, even though he didn't say it. So some writer in the West, the Western part of the Roman Empire, this Western paraphrase added these 6 words, 8 words in English, 6 words in Greek, to tell you this is what, lest somebody read it and think you don't have to keep the Torah, lest somebody read it and think that you are supposed to keep the Torah, they added these words to make it clear, do no such thing. And what's beautiful about this example is this is not a problem of translation. It's a problem of which manuscript do we rely on. It's not that the translators of the NRSV took 6 words out of the Bible. They just based it on a different manuscript.